In the last few days, we have been seeing a lot of unsubstantiated claims like, the Batman is more faithful to the comic book, so he is a better Batman. Nolan ruined the modern Batman. Christian Bale is not a good Batman, and so on. To discredit the Nolan trilogy, so what does this comic book compatibility thing prove? Or does it make a Batman better? At least for live action. Let's get some clarity on that. This question is basically meaningless. Batman has been in the comics for more than 80 years. Stories by multiple writers in multiple comics, team-ups and supergroups, several reboots, and different iterations across the multiverse. It would be literally impossible even to create a timeline everyone could agree on. Too many contradictions in the source material. Same for any comic book character. Spider-Man has been around for 60 years, and look how many variations have popped up. Not to mention the no-aging thing. When Spider-Man was introduced, we were the same age. Now I am 75, and I am kind of old. But Spidey is still a young guy. Hard to seriously worry about accuracy. Christopher Nolan wrote and created original stories. However, Nolan paid homage to and implemented plot points from some of Batman's most famous comics. Not only did he reference a lot of the modern-era Batman canon, but he followed the career timeline quite closely in his films. Batman Begins features Bruce Wayne as Batman in his first year and is heavily inspired by Batman Year One, which details his first year of crime fighting in the comics. A gritty origin story that shows a corrupt Gotham and features Carmine Falcone. Year One also details James Gordon's first year in Gotham and the building of his character and partnership with Batman. It is the perfect starting off point to see Batman's origin and how he came to be. The iconic moment where Batman uses a sonic device in his boot to attract a swarm of bats is used in the film. This is straight from the comic panels of Year One. The film follows the comic's lead in teasing the existence of the Joker at the end of the story. The Dark Knight takes place 12 months after the events of the first film. This puts Batman in his second year of his career. In the second year of Batman's career in the comics, he comes across the path of a murdering maniac, the Joker. The Man Who Laughs is a modern, more dark retelling of the first meeting between Batman and the Joker from 1940s, Batman #1, which was a huge influence on the Joker's antics in the film. The Man Who Laughs takes place after the events of Year One, and Batman is confronted with a criminal he has not encountered before. Much like the film, he hasn't accounted for a man like the Joker, and is at a loss how to deal with him and understand his motives. In the film, we see Gordon and Batman teaming up with District Attorney Harvey Dent. They have hopes of bringing down the mob families and destroying corruption and organized crime in Gotham once and for all. Batman: The Long Halloween takes place in the second year of Batman in the comics. A continuation of the story forged in Year One also, it details Gordon, Batman and Dent forming a partnership to fight crime, and was a huge inspiration to Nolan's second installment, The Dark Knight. Their war on crime is interrupted by a serial killer causing chaos all over the city, much like the Joker in the film. The Long Halloween also details the tragic events that lead to Harvey Dent's life spiraling out of control. These events lead to Dent becoming the villain Two-Face. Nolan also details the origin story of Two-Face in his film, as another sign of the influence the comic story The Long Halloween has, and further keeping faithful to the comic canon of modern Batman. The Dark Knight Rises takes place 8 years after the events of the second installment of the trilogy. Due to the sacrifice that Bruce Wayne made of taking the blame for Dent and the loss of Rachel, Nolan felt that the repercussions of those events needed substance, hence the time gap. This age gap is a clue to the comic fans that noticed. This time period puts Bruce in the 10th year of his career as Batman in the film. It makes sense Nolan chose the specific number of 8 years, because this brings us to the comic event Batman: No Man's Land. This story was a massive influence to the final installment, especially in the last third of the film. Gotham, after a plague and earthquake in previous stories, is cut off from the rest of the country by the government. Blowing the bridges and having National Guard at remaining checkpoints, Gotham is left on its own, as gangs wage war in the streets for territory, and Gordon, with a small remainder of police, tries to maintain order. The battle in the streets at the end of the film was another nod to the comic. You can see why the trilogy is praised so much by comic fans of Batman. Christopher Nolan went out of his way to follow the modern era comics timeline in his films, while creating his own version of Batman and his own world in which he existed.
As a result, these allegations are nothing more than a smear campaign, just as the Batman has not been able to surpass any of the films of the Nolan trilogy in terms of cinema and filmmaking. So it seems to be something that was created to defame the character and lose credibility in the eyes of the people by using the comic books as an excuse, and that does not come to the agenda before 2022. But remember, the Dark Knight trilogy is more than just comic book movies. The Dark Knight trilogy transcended the superhero movie genre and became something more, something better. It talked about mature themes and executed them brilliantly.